Okay, welcome to part 3 of my Nintendo 64 collection video. Let's get cracking with the games. First up, Hybrid Heaven. This one's a really great game. It's an RPG made by Konami. A lot of people were disappointed because they were hoping to get Metal Gear Solid on the Nintendo 64. This is what we got instead, Hybrid Heaven. Now, it's nowhere near as good as Metal Gear Solid, let's be honest, but it's still a really great game. One problem that I had was it used the expansion pack, but if you used the high-res graphics, the frame rate would go really slow and it would become laggy, so they kind of hadn't worked out how to properly utilise it just yet. The storyline is really good. It's to do with sort of like an undercover, sort of government base, to do with aliens and all kinds of crazy stuff. You play as multiple characters in the game. It's RPG elements, so you can level up parts of your body as you fight. There's weapons. It can get a little bit linear, but still a great RPG, and there's not too many of them on the Nintendo 64. Top Gear Overdrive, another game that uses the expansion pack. This one's a pretty good racing game. At the time I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a brilliant game. Whereas when I played it recently, I found out it's not quite as good as I remembered, which was kind of disappointing because I really enjoyed this when it came out. Big selection of cars, kind of like an arcade style racer. But again, if you've not played it, it's part of a series, so pick up this one, give it a play. Force Gemini. This one's a difficult one. A lot of people really love this game. It got perfect reviews. I was really looking forward to playing it, and then when it came out I played it and I wasn't too impressed, to be honest. It's kind of fun. It's a little bit different than some of the other games that Rare used to make, but for me it just felt a little bit too linear. The controls weren't quite as tight and responsive as you'd expect from a Rare game. Still really fun though. Again, you play as different characters throughout it, including the dog. Lots of things to find, lots of action in it, great weapons, but something didn't click with this one for me, so that's why it's not one of my sort of more favoured games on the Nintendo 64. I think it was back in part 1, I talked about Mystical Ninja 2, so this one of course is Mystical Ninja 1. One of my favourite Nintendo 64 games, really great game. We got this one from our local game shop when it first came out. I think it was actually my brother that went and got it. Didn't really know what to expect. We were both waiting for Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time to come out. The guy in the shop said this one would be a good alternative to kind of, kill some time until the release of that one, because it did keep getting delayed. So we picked up this one, not really knowing what to expect, but it turned out to be one of my favourite Nintendo 64 games. Really great story. The characters in it were, lots of fun, there's comedy moments in there, lots to explore and see. It's a pretty lengthy game. It will take you a good number of hours to complete. The graphics are obviously nowhere near as good as some of the 3D adventure games on the Nintendo 64, but the characters kind of sort of make up for that sort of deficit. So really great game. It's a lot cheaper to buy than the extremely rare version of Mystical Ninja 2, which I talked about previously. So if you haven't played this before, definitely it's on my recommendations list. FIFA, this is Road to World Cup 98, it's a football game. Again, there's better football games, so I'm not going to talk too much about this one, but again, really cheap to buy. Looks really dated when you play it, and not one that I'd be in a hurry to pick up, but again, still a nice part of the collection. Monster Truck Madness. This one's a pretty interesting game. It's actually made by Rockstar, so if you played any of the Grand Theft Auto games, it's actually made by the same company, which a lot of people find it really surprising when they find that out. Not a bad game at all. It's a monster truck racing game. What more can be said about it? A little piece of uniqueness about this was the fact that there's a lot of WCW sponsored drivers in this. You've got like the Hitman, you've got the NWO monster truck. Makes it a little bit different. It's a pretty average game, nothing too exciting, but for a racing game, it's a little bit of fun. AllStar Tennis 99. Again, it's a tennis game. What more can be said? It's not as good as like the virtual tennis games that Sega used to make. That sort of around that time. But all in all, it's a tennis game. Not really a whole lot to say. I'm not a big tennis fan, but there you go. GT64. This is Championship Edition. Again, pretty good racing game. When this came out, the graphics at the time were really good. A lot of people comparing it to to maybe like the early Gran Turismo on the PlayStation, it's not as good as that, nowhere near as good. Again, it's a little bit arcadey for my liking, but still lots to do in there. Not a bad racing game, but there's better ones on the system. Kobe Bryant in NBA Courtside, this one brings back some memories. Me and my brother and a lot of our friends, we were really big basketball fans when this came out. We used to play basketball for hours every day. When we weren't outside playing, we'd play this if we were going to play a basketball game. It's the best one on the system, a lot better than the EA produced ones. Controls were really good at the time. The graphics were amazing, lots of dunks, everything you'd imagine. This is probably, apart from the sequel, this is the best basketball game on the Nintendo 64. And F1 World Grand Prix 2. I'm not a huge Formula 1 fan. We had F1 World Grand Prix because it was one of the earlier Nintendo 64 games, so we got that one. We quite enjoyed it, so we picked up the sequel. Pretty much of the same. It's a Formula 1 racing game. It's just got slightly better graphics than the previous one, updated drivers, brands, everything you'd expect in a sequel to a Formula 1 racing game. So that's all for this part of the video. Please put any comments if you remember any of the games that I've just talked about, and join me again for the next part pretty soon. Click subscribe to make sure that you don't miss out. The button's just there.